Hi friends, it's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. I have a fun tutorial today that's bright and poppy with lots of color and lots of florals using my brand new stamp set called Today and Always with Gina K Designs. And I'm super excited about this tutorial today because we are going to go sentiment neutral on the cover. So really just going to build a fun watercolor inspired bouquet right here on the cover of this card. So here's the inspiration, and I'm going to walk through all of the techniques to just kind of get this poppy watercolor like look and feel. Super simple. There will be some fussy cutting, but it's going to be okay. Alrighty, so here's the color palette that I am going to work with, and I've kind of gathered these colors, a little bit different from the card inspiration, but I've got a mix of Gina K Designs inks with sweet mango, sweet corn, and peach Bellini. I also have key lime and jelly bean green because I'm going to be using some greens, and I have ocean mist, and I've pulled some distress inks out. And I've got a wild card here for the Gina K line, Coral Reef, because I really think I want to use, bring out some of the pinks that are in that Coral Reef. So I also pulled Abandoned Coral, Salty Ocean, and the squeezed lemonade from the Distress Ink line. I'm not sure if I'm going to use them, so we'll see. So I've got a mister here. I've got my tidy towel because there's going to be a mess to be made here. I've got my Connect glue because I really enjoy using that glue. It's just amazing. I also have a couple little pop foam dots here to pop up some of the watercolor florals. I've got my scissors for some fussy cutting, and here are the cardstock pieces. So I've got a piece of watercolor paper cut to fit the A2 size card, and I'm using B Paper Company's watercolor paper. This is no surprise. I use it all the time. You really can use any kind of watercolor paper you have. I just love using this one. And I also have a piece of the Turquoise Sea Gina K Designs cardstock cut to an A2 size card. Love it! And here's the deal. We've got the whole inside to do the sentiment for this card. So it keeps it easy, easy breezy. So there'll be no sentiment on the cover this time. We're going to just create a bouquet. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with some key lime and ocean mist to create that watercolor background. So I'm taking the cubes and I'm laying them right down on my mat in just across in like a line formation here. And I am letting the key lime mix a little bit between the ocean mist. So there's a line where the two mix that's going to create a different color. So just taking your cube or your ink pad and lining it up on your craft mat is going to give me the ink striping effect that I want to get on the watercolor cardstock. So I'm just laying this out to get that look and feel that I want to try to get. I've got one more layer here of ocean mist just to kind of have a few more ocean mist layers. When I mist this up, these two are going to all mishmash together. So instead of using the distress inks, I did pull this mermaid, this salty ocean, and just kind of did that last little line there. I'm not really sure why, just to add a little more color so you can see me just kind of dotting that salty ocean in there just to get a little bit of a different variation from the ocean mist. So I'm going to go ahead and mist this with some water, just kind of cover up my other areas so I don't get that splash of distress ink everywhere. And I'm really kind of hitting it pretty hard because the dye base inks need to be pretty super wet in order to make a good impression on the watercolor paper. Now, normally I will lay the watercolor paper down and I'll just kind of shimmy it and twist it. But this time I'm going to drag the watercolor paper through the line formation I have here in the ink. And I'm not really sure what's going to happen other than it's just going to be a little bit different. I'm just using the paper and just kind of swiping it across. So I end up getting this swipe look across the watercolor paper, and I'm misting it a little bit more because you can see with the dye-based inks, they react to the water, but they don't, they will pill up into the texture and the crunchy parts of the paper, which is what I love about it. And it's super cool. So when it dries, it gives you a little, it brings out the texture in the watercolor paper. So I'm totally digging this. It's going to dry and be like even better. But remember, you don't shimmy the paper in, you drag the paper across. So you kind of get some of the loose formation of the lines, but you also can see where the colors meet, and that just makes it fantastical. Okay, moving on. And I'm letting that piece of paper dry, air dry. So I'm moving on right now to create the watercolor bouquet elements that we're going to use to pop up on the card. So I've got the 2 flowers. I also have the ranunculus flower, which is the line art flower, and I'm going to pull some of the leaf elements and the fern elements. But I'm going to start right now first with the large brushstroke flower. And I've pulled the sweet mango here, and I'm just inking it up, and I'm going to mist this pretty hard, so to speak. I'm going to hit it with a lot of water just so that I can get that just that dye-based ink to just kind of move a little bit, and I'm hitting it again with some water. It's not water reactive, so it's not going to bleed like it would with a distress or a distress oxide, but that's okay. It reacts with the enough enough to give me that texture and that watery, like washy feel. Okay, so I'm pulling the abandoned coral distress ink. So we're going to see a little bit of a difference between this next bloom. So because that particular ink is water reactive. But what I love about the distress inks is that they're more dense in their intensity of their color. So here's the abandoned coral, and it kind of, even with all that wetness, it went down pretty solid. And it's a little bit different from the dye-based one. The dye-based one has a little more stippling in it, which I really love that. It creates a little bit more texture. And then the abandoned coral is just kind of faded out a little bit in color, but you can see all that stippling in the dye-based bloom coming forward. And when it dries, it's going to add another extra added element of texture and dimension. And I love it. Just love it, love it, love it. Okay, so now I'm inking up the ranunculus flower. That's what it's called, and it's a really dense line art illustration. So it can be colored, with any kind of medium, but it's a little more challenging because those lines are a little closer together. So I've pulled abandoned coral and peach bellini for this because I'm going to do a mix mashup of the color right on the stamp. So I've taken the abandoned coral to the center portion of the ranunculus, and I'm taking the peach bellini around the edges. And I am going to give this a healthy dose of misted water, and then just kind of stamp it down and see what happens. So, oh my goodness, it's not that great. And that's because I didn't clean the stamp prior. Now, when it dries, I'm really going to love that because there's a little bit of green blue in there, and I'll probably end up using that embellishment for something else. But for now, that's really not the effect that I wanted to get. So, pulled out my tidy towel, got that stamp really super clean. This particular stamp in the ranunculus is going to get, some ink in the crevices. So if you really want a clean, pristine stamp of it, you're going to need to make sure it's cleaner than what I did. Okay, so back to this time I grabbed the coral reef and the sweet mango. So I kind of ditched my peach bellini. Didn't really like the way those colors were coming together, even on my boogered up one there. So just changing it up a little bit. So giving this a nice healthy mist of water again, and just stamping it down. Not a lot of pressure, and oh, delicious. I love this color, and it's definitely much more complementary to the other 2 big florals there. And I'm just going to give it a little mist again, just to get some of that dye-based ink to run a little bit. So I'm just moving the cardstock around and seeing if I can coax the dye-based ink to go into some of the water areas, because wherever the water is, the ink will flow. So pretty. Okay. So now I'm going to use the extra space I have over here on the watercolor cardstock to just kind of stack up all of my leaf elements, my fern, and the other bits and bobbles, the floral and fauna that I'm going to put in there. So I'm just kind of stacking all of these pieces up on my stamp and to utilize, the most of that watercolor space that I've got there. So I've taken the fern, the two leaves, and just some of the elements from the stamp set, and put them right up here because I'm going to go ahead and ink them up with a couple different shades of green, and I'm just going to ink them up the same. And instead of doing it individually, I'm just kind of making good use of the space, even though it looks like it's going to booger up here and run into that ranunculus. That's okay. We're just going to give it a go and see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my inks, and I'm trying to make a big decision here on which greens I'm going to use, but I am going to go ahead and pull key lime and jelly bean green, and I think I'm going to tap it in with a little bit of ocean mist. So I've got key lime here. I do have the ocean mist color. So I'm going to go ahead and ink all of the stamps up, and you can see that it's very random. I'm just kind of turning the pad round and round and just kind of being pretty random, and then going back in with that key lime and just adding a little bit of that color here and there and everywhere, and it's kind of mixing right on the stamp. So yes, I know it will contaminate the key lime a little bit, but I do go back and clean that up. Grabbed a little bit of that Mermaid Lagoon. Didn't think I was going to do that, but it was sitting over there on the side there. Not Mermaid Lagoon, excuse me, Salty Ocean. Salty Ocean. Grabbed a little bit of that and then just added a little more ocean mist, and just getting that stamp set good and juicy. Adding some mist to it just to get those colors to kind of play well together and have some fun together before I go ahead and stamp it on there. So I know that when I stamp this, the one floral bits piece kind of just ran into the ranunculus, but I'm okay with that because that ranunculus got that little bit of color on there, and it's kind of fun. So I'm misting it again just to see if I can coax some of those dye bastings to just kind of move together and play well together. But the cool thing about that when they dry is because they're not completely like water reactive, it's okay. When they dry, they've got that watercolor stippling look to it because of the texture of the paper. So that's what makes it super fun. Okay, so I'm redoing that one piece that boogered up and kind of flew in to the ranunculus a little bit. I really didn't like the way that one bottom piece looked, so I'm just going to go for it and just redo it again. And the other piece, I'm just going to cut that out and see what happens. I may or may not use it. I'm not sure. That's kind of how it goes with me. I just kind of stamp things, and along the way, I make some adjustments. Okay. So I really want to work with all of these elements right now. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've pulled in a piece of just cardboard here that was sitting in my space, just so I can kind of heat that up and get that bone dry before I start to cut out all of my embellishments. And yes, I did fussy cut these out. Yippee! I do love to fussy cut, but look at all those fun little elements to build this bouquet. Love it! Okay. So I did end up not using that one piece that ran into the ranunculus, but I am going to recover with something fun here. So the background piece was still pretty wet, so I'm really just kind of hitting this with the heat tool to get it super, super bone dry. And the watercolor paper is buckling a little bit, but I'm not concerned. So I do heat it from both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and adhere this straight to my piece of turquoise, and I'm breaking out the big guns here because that paper was a little bit buckled from the water. So I've got my ATG gun that has that really super strong adhesive, and I'm just going to go ahead and let that sit for a bit as I move on. Okay, so breaking out the big guns again. Tranquil teal. So I've decided to take that one floral bit that wasn't that ran into the ranunculus when I was creating the embellishments, and just go ahead and over stamp it right onto my background. And I'm also going to do that with the fern, and using the tranquil teal, which was a total wild card color about halfway through the process here, enables me to get that lights and darks in the design here. So in the background, we have the key lime and the ocean mist and these beautiful blues. And when you take the tranquil teal and you put that on top of that layer, it just creates that illusion of that second layer popping through. And now I'm building the bouquet. So I'm laying all the other pieces on top. So again, then we get our third layer of dimension without adding a tremendous amount of height to the card. So I'm just kind of nesting these pieces together to make them look like they've always been friends, and then just popping up the floral pieces. And I'm going to nest the floral pieces kind of into each other. So I'm going to start with that largest piece, that ranunculus there, and you can see it hasn't added a tremendous amount of height, but it's allowing me to interlock the florals, the brushstroke florals, into it, which makes it kind of super fun, adds a lot of extra dimension, and I'm kind of just shimmying it in there and just adding that interlocking look between the three florals, and adding three elements here that are popped up and have the same height add a little bit of extra texture, dimension, and make the whole composition of the card really visually pleasing. So we've got the background layer underneath that's at the base. We have another layer of over-stamped images, and then I've got some popped up single layers with the fern and the other floral piece. And now I'm going to put on the leaf element. I'm just kind of negotiating with myself on where I want to put that. And I really wanted to create that look and feel that supports that three flowers that's kind of going off the top of the card. So I just went ahead and just used some Connect glue and popped them right there as embellishments. So we've got like 3 layers here going, and they're just so fun, and they came together, and those interlocking flowers I think really make the whole design. Okay, so again, when I get to the end here, I'm just kind of negotiating with myself, what little pop of embellishment am I going to put on? So I've decided to go ahead and use some Nuvo drops and add a little extra dots. And these are the white, just the solid white Nuvo drops. And I'm just kind of popping in little tiny drops in a couple different places just to add a little extra visual dimension to it, but it doesn't add a lot of height. And it just kind of pops that center of that one coral-like flower and a little bit out in the blue, and put a little bit of extra texture onto the leaf elements. Super simple, easy to add in, and I'm just really digging the way it looks. And I would normally do this with one of the unicorn of white pens, the Uniball Signo, but I'm using the little dots today just to get a little extra dimension. And that also pulls the white of the paper too, so you get a little bit of that white going. Really, really loving the way this final card has come together. Super simple. You could put a sentiment on it, but I'm going sentiment neutral today. Here's the original inspiration, and I'm really digging the one on the left a whole lot better. I think the color palette works better with each other. I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial. Thanks so much for joining me. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you next time.